Picture this, you're standing in a dimly lit classroom in 1960s San Francisco. The air is thick with tension. An elderly Chinese Wing Chun master, cancer slowly eating away at him, faces down a United States Marine Corps gunnery sergeant. This isn't just any Marine. This is a man who's been trained to kill, a combat instructor who's forgotten more about violence than most people will ever know. And yet, the old master stands there, calm as still water, ready to defend not just his student, not just his honor, but the dignity of an entire community that's been pushed to the breaking point. Now, here's the thing that'll make your spine tingle. This master knows he's dying. He's got months, maybe weeks left. Every punch he throws could be his last. Every breath is borrowed time. But does he back down? Does he take the easy road and fade quietly into the night? Absolutely not. What you're about to hear is the story of one of the most emotionally devastating, technically brilliant, and culturally significant martial arts films ever made. This isn't just another kung fu movie with flashy choreography and paper-thin plots. This is Ip Man 4, the finale, the closing chapter of a franchise that redefined what martial arts cinema could be in the 21st century. And I'm going to tell you right now, if you think you know how this story ends just because it's the fourth film in a series, you're in for some serious surprises. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty, let me ask you something. What does it mean to truly finish what you started? What does legacy look like when you know your time is running out? How do you pass the torch when your hands are shaking and your body's betraying you? These aren't just philosophical questions, they're the beating heart of this film, and by the time we're done here, you're going to understand why Ip Man 4 isn't just a movie. It's a meditation on mortality, fatherhood, cultural identity, and the idea that some fights are worth having even when you know you can't win. So buckle up, because we're going deep. We're talking scene-by-scene breakdowns, character psychology, the historical context of Chinese-American relations in the 1960s, the symbolism woven into every fight sequence, and why this film hit differently than anything else in the franchise. This is going to be a journey, folks. And trust me, it's going to be worth every single minute. Ip Man 4, the finale dropped in December 2019, and it arrived with the weight of an entire legacy on its shoulders. Directed by Wilson Yip, who'd helmed every single film in the franchise, this wasn't just another sequel. This was being marketed as the definitive end to Donnie Yen's portrayal of the legendary Wing Chun Grandmaster Ip Man, the real-life teacher of Bruce Lee and one of the most influential martial artists in history. Let's set the stage properly here. By 2019, the Ip Man franchise had become a cultural phenomenon. The first film in 2008 had revitalized the martial arts genre at a time when it was gasping for air. It gave us a hero who wasn't a Superman, who didn't have magical powers or superhuman abilities. Ip Man was a regular guy who happened to be exceptionally skilled, who valued humility and restraint, and who only fought when absolutely necessary. Donnie Yen brought a quiet dignity to the role that resonated with audiences worldwide, and suddenly, everyone wanted to know about this unassuming master who trained the most famous martial artist of all time. The second and third films had expanded the mythology, showing us Ip Man's struggles during the Japanese occupation, his arrival in Hong Kong, his challenges establishing a school, and his complicated relationship with fame as his student Bruce Lee became an international sensation. Each film had raised the stakes, deepened the character, and pushed Donnie Yen to new levels of performance. Now, with the fourth film, the creative team faced an impossible challenge. How do you end the story of a real person who actually lived? Ip Man died in 1972 at age 79, so everyone going into the theater knew this wasn't going to have a traditional happy ending. The question wasn't whether Ip Man would survive, it was how the film would handle his mortality with grace and dignity. The supporting cast is stacked. We've got Donnie Yen returning as Ip Man, obviously, delivering what many consider his career-defining performance. Wu Yue plays Wan Zonghua, the head of the Chinese Benevolent Association in San Francisco. Scott Adkins, a legit martial artist and action star in his own right, plays Barton Geddes, the film's primary antagonist and a Marine Corps combat instructor. Donnie Yen reprises his role as a young Bruce Lee, which had to be a mind-bending challenge because how do you play arguably the most famous martial artist ever? And then we've got Vanus Wu as Hartman Wu, a Tai Chi master caught between two worlds. Genre-wise, this is a martial arts biographical drama, but it's so much more than that. It's a period piece set in 1964 San Francisco, right in the middle of the civil rights movement, the Vietnam War escalation, and massive cultural upheaval in America. The film doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's deeply engaged with questions of racism, immigration, cultural preservation, and what it means to be a foreigner in a land that doesn't want you there. When this film was released, audiences had certain expectations. They wanted to see Donnie Yen do his thing, those lightning-fast chain punches that wouldn't dummy work, those fight scenes that feel like violent poetry. But they also wanted emotional closure. They wanted to see Ip Man's relationship with Bruce Lee explored. They wanted to understand how a man faces death with dignity. And most importantly, they wanted a finale that would honor everything that had come before while standing on its own as a complete cinematic experience. The film was a box office success, grossing over $176 million worldwide against a production budget of around $52 million. Critics were divided. Some praised it as a worthy conclusion, others felt it was too melodramatic or politically charged. But the audience response was overwhelming. People weren't just watching a kung fu movie. They were saying goodbye to a character they'd followed for over a decade, and that emotional investment made every punch, every quiet moment, every revelation hit with devastating force. The film opens with a scene that immediately tells us this isn't going to be business as usual. We're in Hong Kong, 1964. Ip Man is in his living room, and the camera lingers on his face with unsettling intimacy. He looks tired. Not just physically tired, but soul tired. There's a heaviness to Donnie Yen's performance here that's different from the previous films. His eyes carry something we haven't seen before: resignation. He's preparing for a normal day. His routine is simple, methodical, almost ritualistic. But then we notice the cough. It starts small, just a minor throat clearing kind of thing. But it persists. And when Ip Man finally coughs hard enough to warrant concern, he looks at his hand and sees blood. Now, the film doesn't make a huge production out of this moment. There's no dramatic music sting, no slow motion, no melodramatic close-up. It's quiet, almost whisper quiet. Ip Man looks at the blood on his palm with the expression of a man who's been expecting bad news and just had his suspicions confirmed. He wipes it away, closes his hand, and continues with his day. This is a man who's spent his entire life practicing restraint and emotional control, and even when confronting his own mortality, he refuses to make a scene. We're introduced to his son, Ip Ching, a teenager who's struggling in school and showing signs of rebellion. The relationship between Ip Man and his son is strained, to put it mildly. There's love there, obviously, but there's also distance. Ip Man is from a generation and culture where fathers don't express emotions openly, where discipline and respect are paramount, and where showing vulnerability is seen as weakness. Ip Ching, on the other hand, is a kid in the 1960s who's growing up in a rapidly modernizing Hong Kong, exposed to Western culture through movies and music, and he's chafing against his father's old-world expectations. The school calls. Ip Ching has been fighting again. When Ip Man arrives to collect his son, the headmaster recommends that Ip Ching might benefit from attending school abroad, perhaps in America, where the educational system might be a better fit. This plants the seed for everything that follows. Here's where the film does something really smart. It shows us that Ip Man, for all his martial arts mastery, is struggling with the most basic challenges of single parenthood. His wife, Chung Wing-sing, died a few years back, between the third and fourth films, and he's been raising Ip Ching alone. He doesn't know how to talk to his son. He doesn't know how to discipline him without seeming harsh. He doesn't know how to express love in a way that a teenage boy would understand or accept. The man who can read an opponent's intentions in milliseconds can't read his own son's emotional needs. The decision is made. Ip Man will travel to San Francisco to explore the possibility of getting a recommendation letter for Ip Ching to attend an American school. Bruce Lee, his former student who's now making waves in America, has extended an invitation for Ip Man to visit. It seems like the perfect opportunity. But here's the catch, Ip Man needs a visa. And to get a visa, he needs to pass a medical examination. And we, the audience, already know what's coming. When Ip Man goes to the doctor, the diagnosis is delivered with clinical detachment, throat cancer, likely terminal. The doctor recommends immediate treatment, but Ip Man refuses. He doesn't want his son to know. He doesn't want to be seen as weak or pitiful. Instead, he makes arrangements for his trip to America, treating it as if it's nothing more than a simple educational errand. The film takes its time with these early scenes, and that's crucial. Lesser films would rush through the setup to get to the action, but Ip Man 4 understands that we need to feel the weight of what Ip Man is carrying. We need to understand that this trip to America isn't just about finding a school for his son, it's about a dying man trying to secure his child's future before time runs out. Every interaction, every quiet moment, every stolen glance carries this unbearable subtext: this might be the last time. The journey to San Francisco is portrayed with a fish-out-of-water sensibility that's both humorous and heartbreaking. Ip Man arrives in this massive, bustling American city, and he's completely out of his element. He doesn't speak English fluently. He doesn't understand the customs. He's wearing his traditional Chinese clothing in a city that's already looking at Chinese immigrants with suspicion and hostility. The year is 1964, remember, this is right in the middle of the Cold War, racial tensions are sky high, and Asian Americans are facing discrimination that ranges from casual racism to outright violence. Bruce Lee picks him up from the airport, and Danny Chan's portrayal here is fascinating. He's not doing an impression of Bruce Lee, he's channeling the spirit of a young man who's caught between honoring his roots and making it in America. Bruce is excited, energetic, talking a mile a minute about his plans to open a martial arts school, to bring kung fu to American audiences, to break into Hollywood. But there's also a nervousness to him. He's aware that having Ip Man here is both a blessing and a potential complication. They arrive at the home of Hartman Wu, a Tai Chi master who's allowed Bruce to use his school as a base of operations. Hartman is played with subtle complexity by Vanda Margraf. He's a Chinese immigrant who's achieved a measure of success and respect in America, but at a cost. He's had to bow and scrape, to play the role of the good Chinese, to never rock the boat or challenge the status quo. When Ip Man arrives, Hartman is immediately concerned. He sees Ip Man's traditional appearance, his refusal to code switch or assimilate, and he knows this is going to cause problems. The film introduces us to the Chinese Benevolent Association, which is basically the governing body for the Chinese community in San Francisco's Chinatown. The head of this organization is Wan Yonah, played by Wu Yue, with a perfect blend of dignity and bureaucratic territoriality. Wan has established himself as the gatekeeper for the Chinese community, and he runs things with an iron fist wrapped in velvet gloves. When Bruce brings Ip Man to meet Wan, hoping to get a recommendation letter for Ching's school admission, Wan refuses. Why? Because Bruce Lee has been teaching kung fu to non-Chinese students, which Wan sees as a betrayal of Chinese cultural traditions. In Wan's worldview, kung fu is a sacred part of Chinese heritage that shouldn't be shared with outsiders, especially not with white Americans who have spent decades treating Chinese immigrants as second-class citizens. Bruce's openness, his willingness to teach anyone who wants to learn, is seen as cultural treason. This conflict is layered with historical and cultural complexity that the film doesn't shy away from. On one hand, you can understand Bruce's perspective. Martial arts are about personal growth, discipline, and self-improvement, and those values are universal. Why should access to these teachings be limited by race or ethnicity? On the other hand, you can also understand Wan's perspective. The Chinese community in America has been marginalized, exploited, and othered for generations. Their cultural practices are one of the few things that remain distinctly theirs, a source of pride and identity in a hostile environment. Giving that away to the very people who've been oppressing them feels like surrender. Ip Man finds himself caught in the middle of this ideological battle, and his response is characteristically measured. He doesn't immediately take sides. He listens. He observes. He's a man who's spent his entire life understanding that the world is more complex than simple binaries of right and wrong. Meanwhile, we're introduced to the film's primary antagonist, Gunnery Sergeant Barton Geddes, played with menacing intensity by Scott Adkins. Geddes is a Marine Corps combat instructor who's also a karate master. He runs a demonstration at a local military event, showing off his skills and making pointed comments about the superiority of military combat training over traditional martial arts. The subtext is clear. He views Chinese martial arts as antiquated, ceremonial, and inferior to Western fighting systems that are practical and battle-tested. Geddes represents a very specific type of American masculinity, the kind that's built on dominance, aggression, and the belief that might makes right. He's not a cartoonish villain. Scott Adkins brings real depth to the role. Geddes genuinely believes he's superior, not out of personal insecurity but out of a worldview that's been reinforced by his success, his rank, and the institutional power he represents. The tension between the Chinese community and the American establishment is building. Chinese immigrant children are facing bullying and discrimination at American schools. A young Chinese girl, Yonah, is shown being physically attacked by white students who mock her ethnicity and culture. Her father, who happens to be one of Hartman Wu's students, is frustrated and angry but feels powerless to protect her. What can he do? Fight back and risk deportation? Complain to authorities who don't care about Chinese immigrants? It's a no-win situation. Ip Man witnesses some of this discrimination firsthand, and you can see it affecting him. He's not the type to make grand speeches or political statements, but his eyes betray his emotions. This quiet, dignified man is watching his people, and make no mistake, despite being from Hong Kong, he identifies deeply with the Chinese diaspora, being treated as less than human, and it's eating at him. Bruce Lee, in his youthful idealism, believes that martial arts can be a bridge between cultures. He thinks that if Americans see the beauty, discipline, and effectiveness of Kung Fu, they'll respect Chinese people more. It's a naive belief, but it's rooted in genuine hope. Ip Man, older and wiser, knows that respect isn't earned through demonstrations or even superiority. It's given or withheld based on power structures that run much deeper than individual merit. The first act concludes with Ip Man still without the recommendation letter he needs, still keeping his cancer diagnosis secret, and still trying to navigate a cultural landscape that's far more complex and hostile than he anticipated. The stage is set for conflict on multiple fronts, between Bruce and Wan over the right to teach Kung Fu to outsiders, between the Chinese community and the racist American establishment, between Ip Man and his own failing body, and between traditional values and modern realities. The second act is where Ip Man shifts gears from contemplative character study to pressure cooker drama. The film starts layering conflicts on top of each other, and the tension becomes almost unbearable. Bruce Lee holds a demonstration at Hartman Wu's school, showcasing Wing Chun techniques to a mixed crowd of Chinese and non-Chinese spectators. Ip Man is in attendance, watching his former student with a mixture of pride and concern. Bruce is good, really good, but there's a showmanship to his performance that Ip Man finds troubling. Bruce isn't just teaching martial arts, he's selling it, packaging it for American consumption. He's turning Kung Fu into entertainment. During the demonstration, some of Wan Yonah's people show up to observe, and their presence casts a pall over the event. They're not there to support Bruce, they're there to judge him, to gather evidence of his betrayal of Chinese culture. The demonstration goes well, but afterward, the confrontation between Bruce and Wan's representatives becomes heated. Words are exchanged about honor, tradition, and what it means to be Chinese in America. Ip Man tries to mediate, but his efforts are complicated by his lack of English and his unfamiliarity with the specific dynamics of Chinese-American relations. In Hong Kong, he was respected and established. Here, he's just another Chinese immigrant without status or authority. It's humbling and frustrating in equal measure. The situation with Yonah, the young Chinese girl facing bullying, escalates. Her father, desperate to give her the tools to defend herself, asks Bruce to teach her Kung Fu. Bruce agrees, seeing it as exactly the kind of cultural bridge building he believes in. But when word gets back to Wan Yonah, he's furious. Not only is Bruce teaching white students, but now he's teaching a child, potentially putting her in danger by encouraging her to fight back against her oppressors. Here's where the film gets really interesting philosophically. Wan arranges a meeting with Ip Man, one-on-one, and they have a conversation that's absolutely crucial to understanding the film's thematic core. Wan explains his position: the Chinese community in America is vulnerable. They're tolerated, at best, and actively hated at worst. The only way they've survived is by keeping their heads down, working hard, staying within their own community, and not causing trouble. If Chinese people start teaching kung fu to Americans and Chinese children start fighting back against white bullies, the backlash could be catastrophic. Racist Americans are looking for any excuse to crack down on Chinese immigrants, and one is terrified that Bruce's idealism and Ip Man's traditional values will give them that excuse. Ip Man listens to all of this, and his response is measured but firm. He understands Wan's fear, he's not dismissive of it, but he also knows that living in constant fear, constantly diminishing yourself to avoid conflict, is its own kind of death. There's a line in this conversation where Ip Man says something to the effect of, "If we spend all our time being afraid, we forget who we are." It's a quiet moment, delivered without bombast, but it cuts to the heart of the immigrant experience. How do you preserve your identity and dignity in a place that wants you to disappear? While this ideological battle is brewing, the threat from Barton Geddes becomes more concrete. Geddes becomes aware of Bruce Lee's growing reputation and sees him as a challenge to the superiority of Western martial arts. Geddes isn't just racist, he's also a true believer in his own mythology. He's been told his entire life that Marines are the toughest, that American fighting systems are the best, that the United States military is the apex of combat's evolution. The idea that some Chinese guy doing ancient martial arts could be on his level is fundamentally threatening to his worldview. Geddes starts making inquiries about Bruce Lee, about this Chinese school where they're teaching kung fu, and about the larger Chinese community. He frames it as professional interest. He's a combat instructor, after all, so isn't it reasonable that he'd want to understand other fighting systems? But there's an unmistakable undercurrent of hostility. The film introduces a subplot involving Geddes' superior officer, who's more reasonable and less overtly racist but still operates within a military and social system that privileges white Americans. This officer serves as a representative of polite racism, the kind that doesn't use slurs or commit overt acts of violence but maintains power structures through institutional means. The midpoint of the second act features a scene that's devastating in its simplicity. Ip Man goes to see a doctor in San Francisco. He's been coughing more, experiencing more pain, and gets confirmation that his cancer is progressing. The American doctor, not knowing Ip Man's situation, recommends aggressive treatment and seems confused when Ip Man politely declines. Through a translator, Ip Man explains that he's just visiting America and will return to Hong Kong soon for treatment. It's a lie, and we know it's a lie, and the quiet way Donnie Yen delivers these lines is heartbreaking. Back at Hartman Wu's school, tensions come to a head. A group of white karate students, inspired by Geddes' rhetoric about the superiority of their martial art, show up to challenge Bruce Lee. They don't come for a friendly sparring session, they come looking for a fight, to prove that Chinese kung fu is inferior. Bruce, being Bruce, accepts the challenge with confidence that borders on arrogance. What follows is one of the first major fight sequences of the film, and it's choreographed to reveal character rather than just showcase athleticism. Bruce doesn't just defeat the karate students, he dismantles them with a combination of speed, precision, and psychological warfare. He's not just fighting, he's making a statement. He's showing them that their assumptions about Chinese martial arts are fundamentally wrong. Danny Chan does an admirable job capturing Bruce Lee's fighting style, those lightning-fast strikes, the famous wo vocalizations, the showmanship that would later make him a global icon. But here's the thing the film emphasizes: Bruce wins the fight, but at what cost? Word of the confrontation spreads rapidly. The Chinese community is divided. Some see Bruce as a hero standing up to racist bullies, others see him as a troublemaker who's going to bring down the wrath of white America on all of them. Wan Yonah is apoplectic. He sees this fight as exactly the kind of provocation he's been trying to avoid. Geddes hears about it too, and his response is chilling. He doesn't explode in anger or immediately seek revenge. Instead, he becomes very calm, very focused. He starts planning. This is a man who's been trained in strategic thinking, and he's now treating the Chinese community as an adversary to be neutralized. The pressure on Ip Man intensifies from multiple directions. He still hasn't secured the recommendation letter for his son. His health is deteriorating. He's watching Bruce Lee walk a dangerous path that could lead to disaster. He's seeing the Chinese community fracture along generational and philosophical lines. And through it all, he's maintaining that facade of calm dignity, even as everything around him is falling apart. There's a beautiful scene where Ip Man practices on the wooden dummy late at night at Hartman's school. The camera work here is exquisite. We see him in profile, the rhythmic strikes against the dummy creating a percussive soundtrack, and the way Donnie Yen moves is almost meditative. But watch his face. Watch the way pain flickers across his features with each impact. Watch the way he has to pause between sequences to catch his breath. This isn't just practice, this is a man trying to hold on to the one thing that's defined him, even as his body betrays him. Hartman Wu walks in on this practice session, and they have a conversation that illuminates both characters. Hartman admits that he's afraid of losing the life he's built in America, afraid of deportation, afraid of violence against his family. He's made compromises, swallowed his pride, accepted indignities, all to maintain a precarious sense of safety. And now here come Ip Man and Bruce Lee, these two men who refuse to bow, refuse to accept second-class status, and Hartman is terrified that their principled stance will destroy everything he's worked for. Ip Man's response is gentle but firm. He tells Hartman that he understands fear, that it's natural and even wise to be cautious. But there's a difference between caution and cowardice, between prudence and surrender. Some things are worth fighting for, even when the odds are terrible. Honor isn't just about winning, it's about standing for something when it would be easier to sit down. The act builds toward a confrontation that seems inevitable. Geddes, using his military connections and the racist power structures that support him, starts putting pressure on the Chinese community. He gets building inspectors to harass Chinese businesses. He encourages police to crack down on suspicious activity in Chinatown. He's using institutional power to wage a low-intensity campaign of intimidation. The Chinese community is starting to fracture under this pressure. Some want to confront the problem head-on. Others want to appease, to give Geddes whatever he wants, to make the pressure stop. Wan Yonah is trying to maintain control, but his authority is being challenged by younger, more militant voices who are tired of living in fear. And Bruce Lee, who started all of this with his idealistic belief that martial arts could bridge cultural divides, is beginning to realize that the situation is far more complicated than he understood. He's seeing the consequences of his actions ripple through the community, and for the first time, doubt creeps into his cocky demeanor. The second act ends with a direct challenge. Geddes, through official channels, arranges for a cultural exchange demonstration at the Marine base. Chinese martial artists are invited to showcase their techniques, ostensibly as a goodwill gesture. But everyone knows it's a trap. Geddes is going to use this demonstration to publicly humiliate Chinese martial arts, to prove American superiority, and to put the Chinese community in their place. The question becomes, who will represent the Chinese community? Who will step into this obvious trap knowing that the game is rigged, that the outcome is predetermined, that winning might be impossible? The act closes with all eyes turning to Ip Man, the legendary Grandmaster, the teacher of Bruce Lee, the embodiment of Wing Chun mastery. And Ip Man, dying and exhausted and far from home, knows what he has to do. The third act of Ip Man 4 is where everything comes crashing together with the force of a sledgehammer wrapped in silk. The film has spent 2 acts building layers of conflict, personal, cultural, political, physical, and now it's time for all of those layers to collide. The preparation for the demonstration at the Marine base becomes a focal point for the Chinese community. There's heated debate about whether they should even attend. Wan Yonah, ever the pragmatist, argues that they should decline the invitation, that it's clearly a setup designed to humiliate them. Going would be walking into a trap with eyes wide open. But others argue the opposite. If they don't go, if they turn down the challenge, it'll be seen as cowardice. It'll confirm every racist assumption that Chinese people are weak, that Chinese martial arts are theatrical nonsense with no practical application. The community will lose face not just with white Americans but within itself. Ip Man, characteristically, says little during these debates. He listens, observes, thinks. But when he finally speaks, his words carry weight. He says, essentially, that the question isn't about winning or losing the demonstration, it's about what they're willing to stand for. If they don't go, they're letting fear dictate their actions. And once you start letting fear make your decisions, you've already lost everything that matters. It's decided, a delegation will attend the demonstration, and Ip Man will be part of it. Bruce Lee insists on coming too, despite the risks. Hartman Wu, after much internal struggle, also agrees to participate. It's a moment of unity, but it's unity born from desperation rather than strength. Before the demonstration, we get a sequence that's absolutely crucial to the film's emotional impact. Ip Man and Bruce Lee have a private conversation where they discuss philosophy, martial arts, and legacy. Bruce is still young, still hungry, still convinced that he can take on the world and win through sheer force of will and skill. Ip Man looks at his former student with a mixture of admiration and sadness because he sees his younger self in Bruce's confidence. Ip Man tells Bruce something profound here, that martial arts isn't ultimately about fighting, it's about understanding yourself and your place in the world. The techniques, the training, the discipline, these are all just tools for achieving clarity and balance. If you use martial arts only to dominate others, to prove superiority, you've missed the entire point. Bruce listens, but you can tell he doesn't fully understand. How could he? He's young, healthy, on the cusp of greatness. He hasn't yet experienced the losses and limits that teach you humility. Ip Man knows this, and he doesn't push. He's planting seeds that will germinate later, in years to come, after Ip Man is gone and Bruce faces his own mortality. The night before the demonstration, Ip Man has a severe coughing fit. Blood stains his handkerchief. He's alone in his room, doubled over in pain, and for the first time in the entire film, we see his composure completely crack. He's scared. Not of Geddes, not of the demonstration, but of dying before he's ready, before he's secured his son's future, before he's said the things that need to be said. Donnie Yen plays this scene with devastating vulnerability. This is a man confronting his own extinction, and it's almost too intimate to watch. The day of the demonstration arrives, and the film's cinematography shifts noticeably. The colors become more washed out, the camera angles more oppressive. The Marine base feels like hostile territory, which, of course, it is. Armed soldiers everywhere, American flags, institutional power made manifest. The Chinese delegation arrives dressed in their traditional clothing, a small cluster of color and culture in this sea of military uniformity. Geddes has prepared an elaborate show. There's a formal setup with bleachers full of Marines and military brass. There's an announcer. There's a whole ceremonial structure designed to emphasize that this is happening on American terms, in American space, under American rules. The Chinese are guests here, and guests can be asked to leave at any time. The demonstration begins with Geddes and his karate students showcasing their techniques. And here's where the film does something really intelligent. It doesn't portray karate as ineffective or foolish. Geddes and his students are legitimately skilled. They're powerful, fast, technically proficient. Scott Adkins, who has a black belt in multiple martial arts in real life, brings absolute authenticity to these sequences. The point isn't that karate is bad, it's that Geddes has weaponized it, turned it into an expression of dominance and racial superiority rather than personal growth. Geddes makes several pointed comments during his demonstration about the practical nature of military combat training versus ceremonial traditional martial arts. He's not just showing off techniques, he's making an argument. He's saying that modern, Western, scientific approaches to combat are superior to ancient, Eastern, traditional systems. The subtext is clear. This is about proving white supremacy. Then it's time for the Chinese martial artists to demonstrate. Hartman Wu goes first, showing Tai Chi forms that emphasize fluidity, balance, and internal energy. It's beautiful to watch, genuinely impressive as a physical discipline. But to the Marines in the audience, it looks like elaborate dance. You can hear the murmurs, the barely suppressed laughter. Hartman finishes his demonstration to polite but clearly dismissive applause. Bruce Lee goes next, and he's determined to show them something they can't dismiss. He brings out breaking boards, performs his famous one-inch punch, showcases the explosive speed and power that will later make him legendary. The audience responds more positively to this because it's spectacular, it's impressive in ways that even martial arts skeptics can appreciate. But Geddes isn't impressed, or rather, he's careful not to show any impression. He watches with the expression of a man cataloguing weaknesses. Then it's Ip Man's turn. And the film makes an interesting choice here. Ip Man doesn't perform flashy techniques or breaking demonstrations. Instead, he does a simple Wing Chun form, the Siu Nim Tao, little idea, which is the foundational form of the entire system. It's slow, deliberate, focused on centerline theory and structural integrity. To the uninitiated, it probably looks boring compared to Bruce's acrobatics or even Geddes' powerful strikes. But Geddes sees something in it that troubles him. He sees efficiency. He sees precision. He sees a complete system of combat distilled to its essential principles. And he knows, on some level, that this unassuming old man is dangerous in ways that spectacle can never capture. After the demonstrations, Geddes proposes a friendly sparring match, Chinese martial arts versus American karate. The way he frames it makes it impossible to refuse without losing face. He suggests that one of his students will spar with one of the Chinese representatives, and whoever wins will have proven their system superior. The Chinese delegation knows this is a setup, but they're trapped. If they refuse, they look cowardly. If they accept, they're playing a game with rules designed to make them lose. Hartman Wu volunteers to spar, but Geddes dismisses him. He wants Bruce Lee, the young hotshot who's been teaching white people kung fu. Bruce steps up, and what follows is a sparring match that's choreographed to show the collision of philosophies. Bruce is faster, more technical, clearly the superior fighter. He lands clean hits, controls the distance, makes Geddes' student look slow and clumsy by comparison. By any reasonable scoring metric, Bruce is winning decisively. But then Geddes stops the match. He claims his student was injured by an illegal technique, which is false, and he declares the bout a disqualification for the Chinese side. It's blatantly unfair, obviously rigged, but who's going to argue? This is a military base. These are Geddes' rules. The Chinese delegation has no power here. The humiliation stings, but worse is coming. Geddes, emboldened by this victory, starts making increasingly aggressive and racist comments. He talks about how Chinese people are weak, how they hide behind ancient traditions because they can't compete in the modern world, how they should go back to China where they belong. He's not speaking to the delegation anymore. He's performing for his Marines, reinforcing their racist beliefs, giving them permission to see Chinese people as less than a human. And then Geddes crosses the line. He makes a derogatory comment about Chinese women, specifically about teaching them their place. The implication is sexual, violent, degrading. It's the kind of comment designed to provoke a reaction, to goad the Chinese representatives into doing something stupid that will justify further retaliation. Ip Man, who has been silent through all of this, who has absorbed every insult with apparent calm, finally speaks. He says, quietly but firmly, that Geddes should retract that statement. The room goes quiet. Everyone can feel the temperature drop. Geddes, sensing he's finally gotten under Ip Man's skin, doubles down. He refuses to retract anything and challenges Ip Man directly. If he has a problem with what was said, he's welcome to step into the ring and settle it like a man. This is the trap within the trap. Geddes isn't just a racist, he's also a legitimately skilled fighter who's been training specifically in combat techniques for decades. He's younger, stronger, in perfect health. Ip Man is dying of cancer, exhausted from travel and stress, decades past his physical prime. In pure physical terms, this fight should be a massacre. But Ip Man accepts the challenge. Because this isn't about winning or losing anymore. This is about standing for something. This is about refusing to let hate and bigotry go unchallenged, even when the costs are impossibly high. This is about showing his student, his community, and himself that some principles are worth defending regardless of the odds. The fight that follows is the centerpiece of the entire film, and it's choreographed and shot with such artistry that it transcends typical action sequences. This isn't just martial arts combat, it's a dialogue conducted through violence, a philosophical argument expressed through punches and blocks and counters. Geddes comes out aggressive, using powerful karate techniques designed to overwhelm and dominate. His strikes are heavy, committed, designed to end the fight quickly. And for the first minute or so, it looks like he might succeed. Ip Man is on the defensive, barely managing to deflect and evade the onslaught. He's not counter-attacking, he's just surviving. But as the fight progresses, something becomes clear. Ip Man is reading Geddes. Every attack, every pattern, every tell, Ip Man is cataloging it all, understanding the system beneath the individual techniques. Wing Chun is built around economy of motion, centerline control, and simultaneous defense and attack. Ip Man doesn't need to match Geddes' power, he needs to redirect it, to find the gaps in Geddes' structure and exploit them. Slowly, incrementally, Ip Man starts to turn the tide. He begins landing those characteristic Wing Chun chain punches, rapid-fire strikes to the centerline that disrupt Geddes' rhythm and structure. Each exchange shows Ip Man gaining more control, more understanding, more dominance over the combat space. But the film doesn't let us forget that Ip Man is dying. Between exchanges, we see him coughing, struggling to breathe, barely staying upright. Every technique takes something out of him that he can't get back. This isn't a young man in his prime dismantling an opponent. This is a dying master spending the last of his energy on a principle. Geddes, frustrated by his inability to simply overpower Ip Man, becomes more reckless, more brutal. He starts going for techniques that are clearly intended to injure or maim rather than just win a sparring match. He's trying to break Ip Man, to humiliate him the way he's humiliated so many others. And this is where Ip Man does something extraordinary. Instead of matching Geddes' escalation, instead of meeting brutality with brutality, he becomes even more precise, even more controlled. He's not trying to destroy Geddes, he's trying to teach him. Every counter, every defense, every technique is a demonstration that power without principle is just violence, that strength without wisdom is just brutality. The climax of the fight is breathtaking. Ip Man, exhausted and bleeding internally, executes a perfect Wing Chun sequence that neutralizes one of Geddes' most powerful attacks and leaves the Marine sprawled on the ground, comprehensively defeated. The silence in that base is deafening. These Marines, these combat instructors who've been told their entire lives that they're the best fighters in the world, have just watched an elderly Chinese man systematically dismantle one of their top instructors using techniques that most of them had dismissed as theatrical nonsense. Ip Man stands over Geddes, and for a moment, you think he might deliver some kind of triumphant speech or final strike. But he doesn't. He simply bows, the traditional martial arts gesture of respect, and turns to leave. Because this was never about humiliating Geddes. It was about demonstrating that Chinese martial arts, Chinese culture, Chinese people deserve respect. Mission accomplished. As Ip Man walks away, his legs give out. Bruce Lee and Hartman catch him before he collapses completely. The toll of the fight is written all over his body. He's coughing blood, barely conscious, utterly spent. They rush him to a hospital, and the Chinese community mobilizes to support him. In the hospital, Ip Man wakes to find Bruce Lee sitting beside his bed. And here, in this quiet moment after the storm, Bruce finally asks the question he's been avoiding: "Master, are you sick?" Ip Man, too tired to maintain the facade anymore, admits the truth. He has cancer. It's terminal. He has months at most. Bruce is devastated. This larger-than-life figure, this invincible master, he's dying. And suddenly all of Ip Man's earlier comments about legacy, about the true meaning of martial arts, about using your time wisely, all of it crystallizes with heartbreaking clarity. Ip Man wasn't just offering philosophical wisdom, he was saying goodbye. They have a final conversation where Ip Man gives Bruce his blessing to continue teaching, to spread Wing Chun and martial arts to anyone who wants to learn. regardless of race or nationality. He tells Bruce that the future of martial arts isn't about preserving it in amber, keeping it pure and exclusive. It's about letting it grow, evolve, adapt. The art must live, and for it to live, it must change. This is the permission Bruce has been seeking, the validation he needed. His master, the Grand Master of Wing Chun, is telling him that his inclusive approach isn't a betrayal, it's the path forward. It's a passing of the torch, a recognition that the next generation must forge their own way. Wan Yonah visits Ip Man in the hospital as well, and they have a reconciliation of sorts. Wan admits that he was wrong to be so rigid, so controlling, so afraid. Ip Man's willingness to stand up to Geddes, even knowing it might cost him his life, has inspired the community. Chinese people in San Francisco are walking with their heads a little higher, speaking a little louder, claiming a little more space. The fight changed something fundamental. Wan secures the recommendation letter for Ip Ching. He pulls strings, calls in favors, and ensures that Ip Man's son will have the opportunity to attend school in America if he chooses. It's a peace offering and an acknowledgement. Ip Man was right about some things being worth fighting for. Let's talk about the performances in this film because they're operating on a level that elevates the entire project from good action movie to legitimate drama. Donnie Yen's portrayal of Ip Man across 4 films is one of the great sustained performances in action cinema. But what he does in the finale is career-defining work. Yen is known primarily as a martial artist and action choreographer, but here he proves he's a serious dramatic actor who just happens to do his own stunts. The physicality is important, obviously, no one else could make Wing Chun look the way Yen makes it look, but the real mastery is in the quieter moments. Watch his eyes throughout the film. Yen uses micro-expressions to convey entire emotional landscapes. When Ip Man receives his cancer diagnosis, there's no dramatic breakdown, no tears, no outburst, just a slight tightening around the eyes, a minuscule shift in his breathing pattern. Yen trusts the audience to read these subtle cues, and it makes the performance feel authentic rather than theatrical. The way Yen physically embodies a dying man is remarkable. He doesn't make it obvious or melodramatic. Instead, he shows us a man who's trying to maintain his normal routines even as his body fails him. There's a slight hesitation before sitting down, a carefully measured pace when walking, a tension in his shoulders that suggests constant pain being suppressed. Athletes and martial artists will recognize these as the movements of someone whose body is betraying them. The small adjustments you make when pushing through injury or illness. In the fight scenes, Yen does something incredibly difficult. He fights with all his usual precision and technical brilliance while also showing exhaustion and deterioration. Every technique is executed correctly, the angles, the timing, the power generation all perfectly demonstrate Wing Chun principles, but you can see the cost. Between exchanges, his guard drops slightly. His breathing becomes labored. His recovery time increases. He's showing us a master who still has all the knowledge and skill but whose physical vessel is failing. It's heartbreaking to watch. The relationship between Ip Man and his son is conveyed mostly through what isn't said. In Chinese culture, especially of that era, fathers didn't express affection openly. Love was shown through sacrifice, through provision, through discipline. Yen captures this perfectly. Ip Man loves his son desperately, but he doesn't know how to say it in ways the boy would understand. The scene where Ip Man decides to go to America, ostensibly for the school recommendation but really to secure his son's future before dying, is all subtext. Yen plays it with such restrained emotion that you want to scream at the screen for him to just tell his son the truth, to bridge that gap. But he can't, because that's not who this character is, and Yen honors that even when it's painful. Scott Adkins as Barton Geddes deserves massive credit for creating a villain who's genuinely threatening without becoming a cartoon. Adkins could have played Geddes as a one-dimensional racist thug, but instead he gives us something more complex and, frankly, more frightening, a true believer. Geddes isn't evil for evil's sake, he genuinely believes in American superiority, in military might as the ultimate arbiter of truth, in racial hierarchies as natural and correct. This makes him far more dangerous than a simple bully. Adkins brings physical authenticity to the role that's crucial. He's a legitimate martial artist, So when Geddes demonstrates karate techniques or fights, there's no fakery involved. You're watching a skilled fighter portray a skilled fighter, and that verisimilitude makes the eventual confrontation with Ip Man feel genuinely high stakes. You believe Geddes could win this fight, which makes Ip Man's victory meaningful. The interesting choice Adkins makes is showing Geddes respect for martial arts even as he disrespects the people practicing them. Geddes isn't anti-martial arts, he's a martial artist himself. But he's bought into the racist ideology that positions Western systems as evolved and superior while Eastern systems are primitive and outdated. Adkins shows this through subtle moments, the way Geddes watches Ip Man's demonstration with analytical interest, the brief flicker of concern when he realizes Ip Man is more skilled than expected. This isn't a man who's underestimating his opponent, he's a man who's genuinely testing himself and finding his worldview challenged. Danny Chan's portrayal of Bruce Lee is a fascinating tightrope walk. Bruce Lee is arguably the most famous martial artist in history, and any actor attempting to portray him faces impossible expectations. Chan wisely doesn't try to do a full impersonation. Instead, he captures the essence, the charisma, the physical dynamism, the youthful confidence bordering on arrogance, the genuine idealism about martial arts' potential to unite people. What Chan does particularly well is show us Bruce at a formative moment. This is 1964, before the fame, before Hollywood, before becoming a global icon. This is Bruce Lee still figuring out who he is, still making mistakes, still learning the hard lessons that will shape his philosophy. The arc from cocky young master who thinks skill is enough to a more humbled, thoughtful practitioner who understands the deeper implications of his actions. Chan navigates this believably. The physical work is impressive too. Chan has clearly studied Bruce Lee's fighting style and movement patterns extensively. The way he executes techniques, the famous vocalizations, the body mechanics, it's all there. But more importantly, he captures Bruce's teaching style, patient, enthusiastic, believing deeply that martial arts can transform lives. The scenes where Bruce is teaching or demonstrating to students show Chan channeling not just Bruce's technique but his pedagogical approach. Wu Yue's Wan Zonghua could easily have been a one-note antagonist, the conservative old guard standing in the way of progress. Instead, Wu brings depth and pathos to the role. Wan isn't wrong about the dangers facing the Chinese community. He's not paranoid or irrational, he's responding to real threats based on lived experience. Wu plays Wan as a man carrying enormous responsibility, trying to protect an entire community that's constantly under siege. His opposition to Bruce and Ip Man isn't personal, it's strategic, born from fear and experience rather than malice. The transformation one undergoes, from rigid gatekeeper to supportive ally, is gradual and earned. Wu doesn't suddenly flip a switch and become a different person. Instead, he shows us a man whose assumptions are challenged, who witnesses courage that makes him question his own choices, and who ultimately decides that some things are worth the risk. The scene where one secures the recommendation letter for IP Ching is played with such quiet dignity, it's an apology and an acknowledgement without words. Vanus Wu as Hartman Wu represents a different kind of immigrant experience. Hartman has achieved a measure of success and integration, but at the cost of constant self-monitoring and compromise. Vanus Wu plays this with visible tension. You can see Hartman constantly calculating, constantly aware of how his actions will be perceived by the white Americans he's trying to prove himself to. His fear isn't cowardice, it's rational self-preservation in a hostile environment. The growth arc from fearful accommodation to principled action is one of the film's most satisfying elements. When Hartman finally decides to participate in the demonstration despite the risks, when he chooses solidarity over safety, Vanus Wu plays it not as sudden courage but as exhaustion with his own fear. There's a beautiful subtlety to it. This is a man who's tired of being afraid and is willing to accept consequences to reclaim his dignity. The supporting cast, including the Chinese immigrant community members and the Marine characters, are generally well drawn. The film avoids making the Marines cartoonish villains, with the exception of Geddes' most extreme moments. They're shown as products of their environment and ideology. Some are casually racist, some are true believers, some are just following orders. This complexity makes the world feel real rather than constructed purely for moral lessons. Ip Man 4, the finale operates on multiple thematic levels simultaneously, and it's worth unpacking these because they transform what could have been a simple action film into something with genuine philosophical and cultural weight. The most obvious theme is dignity in the face of death. Ip Man's cancer is both a literal medical condition and a metaphor for mortality itself. How does a man who's spent his entire life cultivating control, discipline, and mastery handle the ultimate loss of control? The film's answer is complex. You maintain your principles precisely because they're all you have left. When your body fails, when circumstances conspire against you, when the future is bleak, your choices in how you respond define who you are. The decision to keep his diagnosis secret isn't portrayed as unhealthy repression, though it certainly has elements of that. It's shown as Ip Man's attempt to maintain agency in a situation where he has very little. He can't control the cancer, but he can control who knows about it and when. He can protect his son from worry. He can complete his mission without the pity that would come from others knowing he's dying. It's a very traditional masculine approach to illness, and the film neither entirely endorses nor condemns it, it simply presents it as Ip Man's choice. The symbolism of Ip Man traveling to America while dying is powerful. A man at the end of his life journey traveling to the new world, a place of possibility and danger, to secure his son's future. America represents both opportunity and threat, much like death itself represents both ending and transformation. The parallel is intentional. The theme of cultural preservation versus adaptation runs throughout the entire film. Wan Yonah represents one extreme: culture must be preserved in its pure form, protected from outside influence, kept exclusive to maintain its integrity. Bruce Lee represents the other extreme: culture must be shed, must evolve, must adapt to remain relevant. Ip Man, characteristically, occupies the middle ground. Wing Chun itself becomes a symbol in this debate. It's an ancient martial art with specific techniques, principles, and traditions. Should it remain the exclusive property of Chinese practitioners, or should it be taught to anyone who wants to learn? The film's answer, delivered through Ip Man's eventual blessing to Bruce, is nuanced. The art must spread to survive, but those who practice it must understand and respect its origins and philosophy. You can't just extract the techniques and ignore the cultural context. That would be appropriation rather than appreciation. There's fascinating symbolism in the contrast between Wing Chun and karate as they're portrayed in the film. Wing Chun is shown as efficient, economical, focused on centerline control and simultaneous defense and attack. It's about using your opponent's force against them, about structure and positioning rather than raw power. Karate, as practiced by Geddes, is shown as powerful, direct, dominating, about overwhelming your opponent through superior force. This isn't meant to be a value judgment about the martial arts themselves, both are effective combat systems, but rather a representation of different philosophical approaches. Wing Chun represents the Chinese cultural values of harmony, balance, and strategic thinking. Geddes karate represents American militarism, power projection, and dominance. The fight between Ip Man and Geddes is really a fight between these worldviews. The immigrant experience is explored with unusual depth for an action film. The movie shows us multiple models of how to exist as a minority in a hostile environment. One's approach is self-protection through isolation and appeasement. Hartman's approach is integration through compromise and code switching. Bruce's approach is bridge building through cultural exchange. Ip Man's approach is maintaining dignity and principles regardless of external pressure. None of these approaches is presented as entirely correct or incorrect. Each has costs and benefits. One's protectionism keeps the community safe but also keeps them marginalized. Hartman's integration provides some security but requires constant self-monitoring and loss of authenticity. Bruce's idealism is admirable but naive about power structures. Ip Man's principled stance is dignified but potentially dangerous for himself and others. The film is deeply engaged with questions of what we owe to our community versus what we owe to our principles. When do individual actions become community responsibilities? If Bruce teaches Kung Fu to white students and this provokes racist backlash, is he responsible for that backlash?